Well, okay.
Yeah. I just keep running out of superlatives and they keep hitting the ground running and not stopping. Man, what a set.
And another
Yeah.
set with unpredictable song placements that really inform the shape of the set. You don't get to hear Watchtower that early in a show. You don't generally get to hear Estimated Profit that early in a show. And it mixes things up nicely and sets up the next song nicely. I love the way the transitions inform the set, and there were some wonderful transitions in this set. So, uh, David, why don't you run the set down?
Okay, but I have to just say it was also so great to watch O'Teal smiling even harder than usual and dancing even harder than usual. As we learned in our interview with him the other night, his back troubles have been reduced greatly since he got a lighter bass and acquired some yoga from professional wrestlers. If you didn't
Right.
see that interview, you should go look it up on YouTube. It was really, really sweet. Anyway, tonight they opened with a terrific little jam that turned out to be Truckin', and that rolled right on in to All Along the Watchtower. As Gary said, a surprising number to hear so early in the show. And that went right into Here Comes Sunshine. And Gary and I both noticed little flirtations with China Cat Sunflower in the jam, but they came back out through Here Comes Sunshine. And then let's see, it was Looks Like Rain, Brown Eyed Women, Estimated Profit, and Deal to close. What a fine set.
Yes, and for some additional audacity points, the transition from Truckin' into All Along the Watchtower consisted of a few bars of the oft sampled Herbie Hancock standard Cantaloupe Island. So,
Is that what that was?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm not hip enough to know what that was, but I know that Jeff Chimenti started playing something different.
Yeah, that's something that Jeff and O'Teal have alluded to in jams before, but it was really fun to hear it in that little spot in the set. So we're here to tell you that the reason we're here is to show you a free preview of the second set if you are watching this on one of the free preview platforms like the Nugs page at YouTube or one of the social platforms of Dead and Company. And we hope it will entice you to look further into perhaps purchasing an entire show or the entire tour or delving into the wonderful world of nugs.net, which is, as we've said before, the only streaming platform totally dedicated to live music. And what that means is you can hear live music like this streaming in real time, but you can also go into an amazing archive of recorded live music spanning decades by some of your very favorite artists, including Dead and Company and other Grateful Dead family bands, but so much more. Pearl Jam, uh, Bruce Springsteen, and as will become more relevant in a few moments, Wilco, among others. So we urge you to check out nugs.net. You can get a 7-day free trial, I believe it's 7 days,
I
to
think so.
check out their amazing wares. You can download already recorded music. You can stream it on your little portable device or on your vast home stereo system. The music is beautifully, beautifully preserved and presented. And we use it all the time, both for recreation and for professional purposes.
That's very, very true. Yeah, Nugsnet is an excellent music resource, particularly in this live music culture of ours. And the streaming service is a newish thing, from what I understand. And there are recent developments too in making stuff from the Grateful Dead archive available. I think they just got a new streaming thing going with Grateful Dead. It's We talked about it with Mark Pincus, the head of Rhino Records and Warner Brothers, but it's all blurring together now as we get to the end of the tour here. So I can't quite remember what facts I was trying to fish for here, but there's definitely something Grateful Dead related. And after all, Brad Serling, who founded Nugsnet, is a big Deadhead, and this whole thing was arose out of his desire to share his tape collection. And that sort of that metaphor, that concert by concert metaphor instead of album or song by song metaphor, as an organizing principle, it's just more suited to the kind of fans that we are. We love live music. So a live music centered archiving program like this a streaming service and all is desirable.
Indeed. So your best bet is go to nugs.net and you can go exploring for free for a while and check them out. As we said before, this entire tour is available. You can pick out individual shows you may have missed. You can pick out shows you went to and want to relive, and you get them in beautiful HD or 4K video and fantastic sound, beautifully mixed by the wizards at nugs.net. So just check it out. You'll thank us. And I think I'd love to bring on our guest right now, wouldn't you? It's We've had so many great guests. This one is really special to me among special guests because he's one of my favorite musicians and one of my favorite people. Perhaps best known as the lead guitarist in one of the world's greatest bands, Wilco, but he is also a band leader, a composer, worked in collaboration with so many artists. An incredible resume, which we hope you check out in great depth. Will you please welcome my friend, Nels Cline?
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Nels.
Nice to meet you.
So great to see you. Yes, my partner, David Gans. I don't believe you've met in person, but Nels, so happy to have you here. So much to talk about your musical history and places where it overlaps with the Grateful Dead. You're not really of the Grateful Dead world or from the Grateful Dead world, but there is common ground, I think, both philosophically and you've had some interaction with Grateful Dead members as well. So let's talk about that a bit. Let's talk about your musical background, where you came from, how you came to music, and especially to improvisation as one of your principal modes of expression.
Well, thank you guys both so much for having me. And actually, that's kind of one of my favorite things to talk about, Gary. Being the old man of Wilco, I actually started listening to rock and roll primarily, and also Indian classical music as a wee lad in Los Angeles, where I grew up in the 60s. And it wasn't until 1971 that I actually heard the Grateful Dead play in concert. But that was also because my twin brother Alex and I were finally old enough to go to concerts, because we started listening to rock and roll of the mid to late 60s from the age of 10, basically. Certainly, hearing a record like Live Dead was influential in pushing us toward the idea of extended forays, improvisational, instrumental forays, which we both were kind of gravitating to naturally. I was kind of a blues rock kind of guy, and also listening to the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield, and I guess that has folk elements. But the blues jam thing pretty much took hold of me as a aspiring guitarist, particularly in the case of the Allman Brothers Band, from the very beginning, actually, having heard that first record and having it be a life-changing experience. So in high school, then moving forward with what we could now call jazz music, it all kind of connected, these long instrumental forays, the sort of friendly searching, if you will, and collective spirit that we hear in the legacy of the Dead and a lot of jazz music, or so-called jazz music, and free improvisation, which is probably what I feel the most comfortable doing musically at this point, or I guess.
Yeah.
Does that answer a question? Wait, what was your question?
that at least it gets to the tip of the iceberg and at least a few feet below as well.
Okay.
And you came to the right place, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. I knew that.
This is our great passion as well. And, the Grateful Dead helped us learn that stuff. And I also came to it already as a lover of jazz, so when I heard the Grateful Dead, when rock music got freed by, the transition from the single to the LP, it freed musicians to express them, which could lead to horrible moments of self-indulgence, but also to real, genuine exploration and musical conversation. Conversation, I think, is the best word here. You actually hear
Well, yeah.
musicians
And
interacting with one another rather than one guy soloing over a repetitive riff.
yeah, well, one person's burdensome overindulgence, as a phrase that Leonard Feather once used, I think, in a review in the Los Angeles Times, is another person's manna from heaven. I mean, one never knows, but it's nice to have freedom.
Yes, David.
Robert Hunter once alluded to one of the achievements of the Grateful Dead being raising self-indulgence to the level of art.
Well, you know, I guess I'm a firm believer in self-indulgence then. I mean, there's this idea of pretension. Is pretension just pretending that someone might care? In which case I'm guilty of every time I play thinking someone's going to care. I mean, we just have our little ideas and we have our dreams and aspirations and we move on from there. It's pretty
Well,
innocent.
if we're lucky, we can just do it for the pleasure of having the conversation with one another.
Exactly. Well put.
Yeah. Now, I want to touch on some of the common ground between Wilco and the Grateful Dead. And one thing that occurs to me is they are two of the hardest to categorize bands out there because Wilco came out of this environment where they were thought of as they're part of the no depression or Americana movement, but then
Well,
they can
alt country.
alt country was or cruel country as the album is now called, the new one. But the fact is that Wilco defied those expectations of them, especially after they hired you, I must say. And they get into areas of dissonance, and they get into areas of pure pop, and they get into areas that sort of brush up against punk. And the Grateful Dead, they were typecast as the psychedelic noodlers, and then they hit the world with something like Working Man's Dead. And so they were right there at the birth of what we think of as Americana. So I love the fact that you guys, both Wilco and the Dead, constantly confound people's expectations of you. I think that's the job you do so well.
Well, I'd have to thank Jeff for confounding most people's expectations in Wilco world. I do think that the connection is the American Songbook, however. I mean, I think that it's a combination of what we now, I guess, sort of categorize very roughly as folk and blues music that came out of the United States of various geographical locations that are, I think, not only embraced by both bands, but embraced with a great deal of not only reverence, but I think thoroughness, like a thorough understanding of the language, and then being able to use that as a springboard if necessary or if desired, and to move on from there. But one doesn't necessarily have to move on from there. The song can be just the song, and then other things could happen as well. I think it's just natural in my case to embrace a sort of broad expressive palette, which is why I thought joining Wilco would be cool when I was asked 18 years ago. And I wasn't really interested in being in I guess, a rock band of note at that point in my life. So it was kind of irresistible, I guess. And I'm very happy with the way things have turned out. And then I ended up absolutely bizarrely, playing a few gigs, or I guess 2 or 3 gigs with Phil Esch and friends, and playing some of that music, some of that Grateful Dead music that I grew up listening to, which was pretty mind-blowing and also a very kind experience, I have to say.
And it was one of those Phil configurations where he had like one guitarist who was really well grounded in the Grateful Dead repertoire, who could sort of, define the song structures. But then he had other
That was
people.
John.
John Cadlezik.
Well, there were three Johns in that band. Yeah,
that's
the
right.
first time.
Was Schofield? Was Schofield?
Schofield was playing too, and Medeski.
Yeah. A
Pretty
fabulous
crushing band.
One of those
Joe
fabulously
Russo on drums.
Yeah, one of those fabulously random Phil lineups, and Phil loves that. Phil loves going into a gig not knowing how it's going to sound himself, because he assembles the band and sort of throws them on stage together and sees what happens, which I think is a wonderful aesthetic to work from.
Well, it's marvelous for me. Of course, I had played with Medeski and had made a record with Medeski. Martin went and toured with them, but playing with SCO, I mean, if you had told me in 1985 that I would be jamming up with Phil Lesh and John Scofield at the same time, I would never have believed you in a million years. But it was just so fun, and it was really, really lovely. And I guess when I think back on the first time I played with, which was with the band we're talking about now at the Capitol Theater, uh, right after those two nights, I went to New Haven and recorded a record with Anthony Braxton, which is actually a really funny story to me because I can't remember the lovely guitar tech that works for Phil. But anyway, he put my two guitars in gig bags, like within 5 minutes, had packed up all my stuff. And I went back to New York City and got up in the morning to take the train to New Haven and grab my gig bag. And when I pulled out my guitar to record with Braxton, I had a Telecaster type guitar instead of my Jazzmaster, which was what I was relying on in my mind to do all my sort of stuff. And in retrospect, it all kind of came together with that, having played that music on that sort of Telecaster guitar, Phil's music, Grateful Dead music, and then moving forward into Braxton world, it all actually strangely worked in spite of my momentary consternation. And so those 4 days or nights or days or nights, whatever, they're really, really clear in my memory because of how surreal and marvelous those 4 days were, and so kind of otherworldly, dreamy, bizarre, great stuff. And I hope I can bring some of the feelings that I get from those experiences into just playing in general. It's a pretty lucky life.
It sure is. Yeah. And, I've had the pleasure of seeing you in so many contexts that I can't count, with so many
Yeah,
musicians
you
that I
have.
share, that I cherish. Again,
A lot of people nobody's heard of.
and a lot of people have heard, as you said, you got to sit in with the Allman Brothers a few times at the Beacon. So you have a
I
history
play
with
with
Oteil.
Oteil.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. A lovely person to play with
Awesome.
and a lovely person to
Incredible.
know. But I think the first time I ever heard you was something connected with the Knitting Factory in New York, something very experimental. Then
Hmm.
I heard you play with our friend Henry Kaiser on his Electric Miles Davis project,
Oh,
the
Yo Miles
Yo Miles.
with
And I
what
think
with
and I
Wadada. Yeah.
right. And then I think the first time I ever actually met you, you were playing with a wonderful singer named Carla Bozulich on a song by song recreation of Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger album. So
Oh, they're
That's
great
true.
record.
if you could pick three more
Uh,
diverse things than that, I don't know what they are.
well, actually, it's funny you mentioned the Redheaded Stranger because I'm thinking of Willie as I listened to Bobby sing today, uh, because his phrasing's getting really, really out there, man. It's
Yes,
like reminding me of Willie.
yes, that in front of the that in front of the beat thing. I've been thinking exactly that. I've been making exactly
Exactly,
that comparison
exactly.
about Bobby. And we should note you've had some opportunities to play with Bobby on the Americana Rama tour a few years back with Wilco, and talk about things you never thought you'd see in this lifetime. Seeing Wilco with Bobby playing Saint Stephen and Dark Star and Saint Stephen on the same stage was
The
completely
only
mind blowing to me.
time, the only time I've ever sung with Wilco was when I sang Dark Star with Bobby.
I love it.
I sang with Bobby. Well,
Hope
I
it's
don't
not
even
the
know if
last
that's a
time.
good thing.
I think it's.
I
I
think
think.
it's,
I think
I'm
it's a
not
great thing.
necessarily thinking it's a good thing, but it was just so bizarre because Jeff heard me doing my Dark Star imitation on the bus and said, "You have to sing it." And he asked Bobby, and Bobby said, "Sure." So that's what
Ah,
happened.
fabulous.
I
That's
love it.
great.
Right? Crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and now you have something coming up with Phil, a glorious one-off, or maybe it won't be a one-off. Maybe it'll grow into something else. A festival just outside Chicago called Sacred Rose in August, and
It's a
you and
mystery.
Tweety, you you and Tweety are joining a Phil Lesh and Friends lineup with the absolutely perfect name Philco. And tell
Yeah,
me
I
about how
have no
you're looking.
idea.
Yeah,
No clue what's going to happen. I really don't know. I know Jeff and I are going to get together and go over some songs. and figure out like what to toss out there as something to do. But we're on tour then, so we're just going to fly in and fly out and hope for the best. It's pretty exciting, and I also know that my friend Scott Metzger is going to be on that festival with Joe
Yeah.
Russo's thing, and so I also love seeing and hearing Scott. So I hope we're there at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course, just to play with Phil, it's going to be
Yeah.
amazing.
The lineup is really a great one, and in fact, you're going to be playing with the gentleman you heard playing keyboards in the first set, Jeff Clementi of
Oh,
Deadhead.
I love Jeff.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Jeff's one of our favorite players, one of the greatest keyboard players ever to play this repertoire, I think. So I think
Oh
you'll
yeah,
have
he's
some really
killing it.
you'll have some lovely conversations there. I intend to be there, and I did notice that Wilco has a gig the night before, and then the night after Sacred Rose, you're in New Haven, and I think I'll make the trip to New Haven as well. So we'll both be a little
Oh
tired, but
man.
I look forward
Okay,
to it.
cool, man. We'll stay in touch about that, Gary. Okay,
Yes,
we'll be able to help each other out a little.
right. We'll do our best. Nels, tell us about other things you have coming up. As I said, you have I recently saw you with the Nels Cline Concentric Quartet, which I love. Any
Uh,
other any recording things you have on the horizon, or live gigs or whatever?
oh boy. Well, there's a lot of Wilco because we have the Cruel Country record out, and so we'll start touring again next month and in September and into early October. Uh, I'll be doing a few gigs here and there around the East with the Concentric Quartet, and that's Tom Rainey on drums, Ingrid Laubrock on saxophones, and Chris Lightcap on acoustic bass. So we'll be playing actually in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia in December or November, sometime like that. And I've got a little house concert run with Chris Lightcap playing duo, and that's going to be with Autumn Defense, Pat and John from Wilco, Glenn Kochi playing solo, and my wife Yuka Honda doing her Eucademics electronics thing. So we'll do that. I don't know where exactly, except Freehold, New Jersey, and Ardmore Music Hall in this early December. I hope to record the Concentric Quartet. I'm still working on getting all the repertoire sort of dialed in since we've only done 2 gigs. It's hard to do rehearsals at this point. Working on that, and I'm going to do some music with I don't know how to describe this filmic work by this amazing Swiss artist named Julien Charrière. He has an installation uh, sculpture plus film, and it's called Towards No Earthly Pole. And he has a soundtrack to the movie, but he's asked me to do an alternative soundtrack to this remarkable film that I think just look up Julien Charrière Towards No Earthly Pole and see what you get, because it's so hard to describe this work. But it's a full length film with no dialogue, just imagery, mostly on icebergs, actually on an iceberg, filmed in the dead of winter at night, along with some other
Wow.
deep oceanic imagery. It's about climate change. It's about survival. It's about the earth, and it's a remarkable work. He's a remarkable artist, so I'm honored to do that, and maybe I'll be able to do a live rendition of some version of my soundtrack at SF MoMA, maybe this year, and maybe in Europe next year, when his show travels. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something important that I'm doing. Like I'm going to do a thing for the Creative Music Studio in a couple of weeks with Billy Martin and John Medeski. We're going to jam out for Carl Berger and Ingrid and everybody, and there should be great music happening there in early
Yes.
August.
Second mention of CMS this week because Oteil did something with them as well. So
Oh,
we
nice.
yeah. Um, well, Nels, I'm so glad that we invited you, and I'm so glad you were able to take us
Oh
up on the
man,
invitation.
thank you, thank you
Um,
guys
Thank
very
you for being
much.
part of
yeah,
this.
and I want to tell people if you are new to Nels's music, there's so much of it to dive into. Uh, his work with Wilco you can find on nugs.net. They have a deep library of Wilco's recording in the Road Case and Front of House series, which you can stream or download or all of that, including one of the loveliest gestures I ever saw a band make when Wilco completed a 3-night run at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, and you stood back from the microphones and let the audience sing Ripple. Do you remember that moment?
I do now. I forgot about that. Well, where else better to do something like that?
Yeah, it was utterly cognizant of the history of that building and the Grateful Dead's relationship to it. So I really love that. And if you want to get Nels Cline in a nutshell, listen to any live recording of a Wilco song called "Impossible Germany," and this is a solo Nels takes. And show after show, I say he can't possibly top the last one, and he almost invariably does. So
it's
welcome
my
to the
weird
world.
Blessing. My weird burden.
Right. Well. So I'm happy to welcome our audience to the world of Nels Cline, and may you explore it deeply and joyously, as I've been able to do with your music for many years now, Nels.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you, Gary, and peace to you all. And that John Mayer guy sounded pretty good.
I'll say.
I think he can play that guitar and sing too.
He kind of
the
gets
band's crushing it. He kind of gets it. It's a beautiful.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me, and safe travels to everybody, and more music.
Right. We'll take it back to the stage, and we thank everyone for listening. Enjoy the rest of the show, folks. Thanks, Nels.
Thank you, guys.